The first time Mara found the clock, it was tucked behind a row of dusty atlases in the back of a closed curiosity shop. The shopkeeper shrugged when she asked about it. "Nobody buys that one," he said. "It keeps odd hours." She laughed, but the laugh had a hollow edge. Something about the brass face, the way its hands were in constant, imperceptible motion, drew her in as if it were a small, passionate animal waiting for someone to notice it. The clock was a puzzle. There were no numbers on the dial, only a series of interlocking rings etched with symbols she did not recognize. When she turned the winding key, the rings rotated and clicked, aligning and misaligning in patterns that made no sense and yet felt fiercely meaningful. Mara took it home because curiosity is a kind of hunger and because the world always seemed to her a place where overlooked things gathered power. On the first night, the clock chimed 13 times at midnight. She laughed again until the room did not look like a room, but like a pause in a room, a breath held between two beats. Outside, the city continued. Taxi horns, distant laughter, but inside the apartment, the air thickened. She blinked, and the scene rewound. The teacup on her table unspilled itself, steam condensing back into the kettle. The clock's hands wound backward a notch and then, with a soft mechanical sigh, resumed forward motion. She touched the glass. The surface was cool as a forgotten stone. Over the next week, the clock roused reality into peculiar behaviors. A missed train returned to the station, doors opening as if to offer her a second chance. Conversations she had lost the courage to finish repeated themselves, but with subtle variations that revealed truths she had avoided. People she had not seen in years appeared at exactly the wrong or right moment. Each loop lasted no more than a few minutes, sometimes an hour, but the loops were not neat repetitions. They were edits, suggestions made by an unseen hand. The city held its breath and then stitched itself back together, slightly altered, as if the clock were a tailor adjusting seams. Mara began to catalog these changes. She marked the clock's rings according to the slight shifts she noticed in the days that followed. A different headline, a new crack in the pavement, the name of a cafe altered on a storefront. The clock, she realized, did not simply rewind time. It offered options forks in the river where a different current could be tested. Each completed rotation granted her a glimpse of the consequences of a small choice. The implications were intoxicating. One could repair past mistakes, avert accidents, or plant a seed that might grow into a different life. But every gift in this story arrived with a key. The first cost was attrition. The further she pushed the clock, the more fragmented the present became. People carried memories that did not match their surroundings. A barista remembered a conversation with Mara that she had never had. A neighbor referred to a dog that no longer existed. Mara's own recollections began to fray snatches of evenings that slipped like loose threads. She started to dream of overlapping versions of events, layered like transparencies, none of them entirely real. The second cost revealed itself as something more insidious. The clock's loops seemed to attract attention. There were anomalies that could not be dismissed as coincidence, reflections in shop windows that did not mirror the street, birds flying in impossible formations, a man in a gray coat who appeared at every iteration and watched Mara with patient intensity. Once, when she tried to stop the clock, the rings resisted her fingers, clicking into a configuration she had not seen before. The air around her seemed to thicken, and for the first time she felt the weight of an intelligence that was not her own. Mara realized the puzzle was not only mechanical but moral. Each alteration carried consequences for others, small shifts that rippled unpredictably through lives she could not control. The clock offered solutions to private regrets, but it also rearranged the world along lines she did not deserve to redraw. In the end, standing in her quiet apartment, the brass face gleaming like a telling sun, she understood the final lesson. Time is not merely a sequence to be edited at will. It is a shared narrative. To tamper with chapters is to risk losing the story itself. She wound the clock one last time, not to change anything but to understand. The rings turned, precise and indifferent. The 13th chime rang out, and for a moment the apartment filled with every possible version of itself. Then the sound faded. Mara placed the clock on the shelf and closed the shop's atlas on top of it, like a lid. She kept the memory of what had been possible and the scars of what had been altered. Sometimes when the city paused and the light hit the brass just so, She would feel the faint, impossible cadence of another hour knocking at the edges of her life, a reminder that some puzzles are meant not to be solved, but to be held with respect.